The wind in the Awahi Mountains never truly stops. It is a restless, prowling thing. It carries the sharp scent of sagebrush. It carries the echoes of a hard, unforgiving life. In the autumn of 1892, that wind felt colder than death to Evelyn Thorne. She stood on the porch of her small ranch near Silver City, Idaho. Her hands were crossed tightly over her chest. She was guarding a heart that had been shattered for 3 long years. Evelyn was only 34 years old. In the East, that was the prime of a woman's life.
But the frontier has a brutal way of adding centuries to a woman's soul. She wore a blue calico dress. It was the color of a fading twilight sky. The fabric was worn thin at the elbows, but it was clean. It was pressed. It was the last shred of dignity she had left. She looked out across the dusty yard. She watched a lone rider approach through the haze of the afternoon heat. She had already made the hardest decision of her life.
If the stranger looked honest enough, she would ask him to become her husband. The man was riding a bay horse. The animal looked as tired as its master. He stopped at the very edge of the porch. He didn't rush. He dismounted with a slow, deliberate grace. He wore a sweat-stained hat. He wore a canvas vest over a rough, homespun shirt. His face was a map of the sun and the long trail. He looked like a man who owned too little.
The stranger pulled off his hat. He revealed dark hair and eyes the color of flint. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was a low, steady rumble. "I heard in town you might be looking for a ranch hand." Evelyn didn't move. She didn't smile. She looked at his strong, calloused hands. She looked at his steady, unwavering gaze. "I am," she replied softly.
"But I don't have the coin to pay a fair wage." The man didn't flinch. He didn't turn away. "I'm not looking for gold, ma'am. I'm looking for a roof. I'm looking for a steady meal. My name is Gideon Vance." Evelyn took a deep breath. The mountain air filled her lungs like ice. She looked at the empty barn.
She looked at the fences that were screaming for repair. She looked at the dark shadows under the man's eyes. Then she said the words that would change the course of her life forever. "I need a husband more than a ranch hand, Mr. Vance." Gideon froze. Nobody had ever offered him a future before. His hat stayed suspended in the air. He looked at her. He was searching for a joke. He was searching for a sign of madness. But Evelyn Thorne didn't joke about survival. "I beg your pardon?" Gideon whispered. "The law in this territory is changing," Evelyn said. Her voice turned firm. It was the voice of a woman who had been pushed to the edge. "The big cattle companies are moving in from the valley. They are hungry. They are greedy. They see a widow alone on a good piece of water as an invitation. If I stand alone on this deed by winter, they will find a way to take it. They will burn me out. I can't pay you, Gideon, but I can give you half of this land if you give me your name." Gideon looked at the horizon. He looked at the dust on his boots. He was a man who had spent his life moving. He had no home. He had no family. He was a ghost in a land of pioneers. "You're serious," he said. It was more to himself than to her. "I have never been more serious in my life," she replied. "It wouldn't be a real marriage. It would be a business arrangement, a pact. You work the land, you keep the claim jumpers away. I provide the home, I provide the meals." What happened next shocked him. He had expected to be turned away. He had expected to be offered a dirty bunk in the barn. He had never expected a proposal, not from a woman with eyes like morning mist. Gideon took a step onto the wooden porch. The wood creaked under his weight. "I have nothing to my name but this horse," Gideon said, "and my word." "Your word is all I'm asking for," Evelyn said. She stepped back. She held the heavy door open. "Come inside, Mr. Vance." The stew is hot. We have much to discuss. That night, the house felt different. For 3 years, it had been a tomb. It had been a museum of memories and dust. Evelyn's husband, James, had died in a mining accident in Silver City. He had been a good man, but the Idaho mountains are hungry for men. Since then, she had managed the ranch alone. But 1892 was a hard year. The territory had only been a state for 2 years. Politics were messy. The land was being carved up by the rich and the powerful. Evelyn knew she was being watched. The Owyhee Land Company wanted her spring. They wanted her peace.
As Gideon ate his stew, he watched her. She sat across the table. Her spine was straight as a lodgepole pine. "I'm not a violent man, Evelyn," he said quietly, "but I know how to hold a line." "That's all I need," she said. "We will ride into Silver City tomorrow. The circuit preacher is there. We will sign the papers. We will tell the town."
Gideon nodded. He didn't ask for a room. He took his bedroll out to the porch. He slept under the cold, indifferent stars. Evelyn lay in her bed. She listened to the sound of another person breathing nearby. It was a sound she had almost forgotten. It was a sound that brought both comfort and a strange, sharp fear. The next morning, they rode into Silver City. The town was a bustling hive.
Miners, merchants, and gamblers filled the streets. The silver boom was in full swing. The Sherman Silver Purchase Act had made men rich, but it had also made them desperate. People stared as the widow Thorne rode in with a stranger. The gossip started before they even reached the courthouse. "Is that the man she's hired?" a woman whispered. "He looks like a drifter," another replied. "He looks like trouble." They found the preacher near the livery stable.
The ceremony was short. There were no flowers. There was no music. It was a transaction in the eyes of the law. "I do," Gideon said. His voice echoed in the small, cramped room. "I do," Evelyn said. Her hand was trembling, just a little, just enough for her to feel it.
When they stepped back out into the sunlight, Evelyn felt a weight lift. But she also felt the sharp sting of judgment. A group of men stood across the street. They were watching. Among them was Silas Miller. He was the agent for the land company. He was a man in a fine suit. He was a man with a cold, calculating heart. He tipped his hat to Evelyn, but his eyes were on Gideon.
"Congratulations, Mrs. Thorne," Silas called out. "I didn't know you were in the market for a husband." Evelyn didn't blink. "The name is Vance now, Mr. Miller, and my husband doesn't like his time being wasted." Gideon didn't say a word. He just looked at Silas Miller. It wasn't a look of anger.
It was a look of absolute, terrifying stillness. It was the look of a man who had nothing left to lose. Silas Miller's smile faltered. He turned and walked away into the shadows of the bank. Silas did not forget that look. Over the following weeks, he noticed things he had never expected to see. One afternoon, he watched Gideon repairing the small church roof without asking for a single dollar. Another day, he saw Evelyn carrying a basket of bread to an elderly widow who lived alone beyond the creek. Neither of them knew they were being watched. For the first time in years, Silas wondered whether he had spent too long serving the wrong people. For reasons Silas could not explain, those quiet acts stayed with him far longer than he cared to admit. As they rode back to the ranch, the silence between them grew. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who had just made a pact. They reached the ranch as the sun was setting. The mountains were painted in shades of violet and gold. "I'll start on the fences tomorrow," Gideon said. "The north line is down." "Thank you," Evelyn replied. She went into the kitchen to start the fire. She felt a sudden, violent urge to cry, but she pushed it down, deep down.
In the West, tears don't mend fences. Over the next few weeks, Gideon worked from dawn until dusk. He fixed the barn doors. He reinforced the corral. He treated the land with a quiet respect. It was a respect Evelyn hadn't expected. He didn't try to enter the house unless invited. He didn't ask her about her past. He simply existed. He was a pillar of strength. But the town wasn't done with them. One Sunday, Evelyn decided to go to the small church on the hill. She wanted to feel a sense of normalcy. She asked Gideon to join her. He hesitated. He looked at his rough, stained clothes. "I'm not much of a churchgoer, Evelyn."
"Please," she said. For the sake of the arrangement, he cleaned his boots. He put on his best shirt. When they walked into the church, the singing stopped. The air turned cold. The preacher, Reverend Graves, looked at them from the pulpit. He was a man who believed in a strict, narrow path. He didn't like the business marriage. It had become the talk of the county.
As they took a seat in the back, the whispers began. "A scandal," a woman hissed. "Living under the same roof without a proper courtship. Shameful." Evelyn kept her head high, but her heart was breaking. During the sermon, the Reverend spoke of unholy alliances. He spoke of women who lost their way. He spoke of men who preyed on the vulnerable. Everyone knew who he was talking about.
Evelyn felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She felt the eyes of her neighbors burning into her back. She thought about her son. She thought about the little grave on the hill. She thought about how these good people hadn't brought her a single loaf of bread when he died. She felt a sob rising in her throat. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear. But then, Gideon did something that shocked her. He reached out.
He took her hand. His hand was rough. It was calloused. But it was warm. It was steady. He didn't look at the preacher. He didn't look at the neighbors. He just held her hand firmly in his. It was a simple gesture. But in that moment, it felt like a shield of iron.
It was the first time they had touched since the wedding. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't pull away. She squeezed his hand back. For the first time in 3 years, she no longer felt like a widow standing alone. She held on like he was the only thing keeping her from falling off the earth. When the service was over, they walked out together. No one spoke to them. No one offered a good morning. As they reached the Ligon, a young woman named Mary approached.
Mary was a widow too. Her husband had left her with 3 small children. She looked at Evelyn with tears in her eyes. "Don't listen to them," Mary whispered. "I wish I had your courage, Evelyn. I wish I had someone to stand beside me." Evelyn hugged the woman briefly. "You are not alone, Mary," she said. As they drove home, Evelyn looked at Gideon. "You didn't have to do that," she said.
"Do what?" he asked.
"Hold my hand." Gideon looked at the road. "A man should stand by his wife," he said. "Even if the marriage is just on paper." The words touched something deep inside her. The frontier was built on those choices. It was built on the backs of people who had nothing but their word. The peace at the ranch didn't last long. Winter was coming early that year.
The first frost hit in late September. The Owyhee Land Company was getting desperate. Across the territory, silver prices had begun to fall. Ranchers whispered that hard times were coming. The economy was crumbling. Investors were pulling out of the mines. Land with water was becoming more valuable than silver. One evening, 3 men rode into the yard. They weren't wearing suits. They were wearing guns. Evelyn was in the garden. She was gathering the last of the squash. She saw them and felt a cold chill. It had nothing to do with the weather. Gideon was at the barn. He was sharpening an axe.
He didn't run for a rifle. He just stood his ground as they approached. "Can I help you, boys?" Gideon asked. His voice was terrifyingly calm.
"We're here to talk to the lady," the leader said. He was a tall man. He had a jagged scar across his nose. "The lady is busy," Gideon replied. "You can talk to me." The man laughed. It was a harsh, dry sound. This story does not celebrate threats or violence. It remembers them only because many frontier families faced dangers like these. We heard the widow hired herself a protector.
"We're here to give her a final offer for this place. $500 and a ticket to Boise. That's more than this dirt is worth." Evelyn walked up to Gideon's side. "The answer is no," she said. It was no when Silas Miller asked. It's no now. The man with the scar looked at her. "You're being stubborn, ma'am. Stubbornness leads to accidents on the trail."
Maybe a fire starts in the barn. Maybe your cattle wander off a cliff. Gideon took a step forward. He was still holding the axe. The blade caught the dying light of the sun. "You're on private property," Gideon said, "and you're threatening my wife. I'll give you 10 seconds to turn those horses around, or I'll see how well that scar of yours handles a real edge." No blood was shed that day.
The courage to stand firm proved stronger than the threat of violence. The men looked at each other. They saw the look in Gideon's eyes. It was the look of a man who had stared down death before. They weren't paid enough to die for a waterhole. "This isn't over," the leader spat. They turned their horses. They galloped away into the dust. Evelyn felt her knees shaking. She leaned against the fence post.
She was trying to catch her breath. Gideon set the axe down. He walked over to her. His expression softened. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm tired, Gideon," she whispered. "I'm so tired of fighting for every inch of dirt." Gideon did something he hadn't done before. He reached out. He brushed a stray hair from her forehead.
His touch was as light as a feather. "You don't have to fight alone anymore," he said. "That was the deal, wasn't it?" Evelyn looked up at him. She saw the honesty in his face. She saw the man behind the drifter. "Why did you really stay, Gideon?" she asked. "You could have taken a horse and left in the middle of the night. You don't owe me anything." Gideon looked at the small house.
Its windows were glowing with lamplight. It looked like a beacon in the wilderness. "I've spent my life looking for a reason to stop," he said. "I thought it would be a gold strike. I thought it would be a big city. But when I saw you on this porch, I realized I was looking for a home. I wasn't looking for a fortune." That night, the first snow began to fall. It was a soft, silent blanket. It covered the world in white. Evelyn couldn't sleep. She went into the kitchen. She made a pot of coffee. She found Gideon sitting by the hearth. He was watching the dying embers. "Tell me about your husband," he said quietly. Evelyn sat in the rocking chair. The wood creaked in the quiet house. "James was a dreamer," she said. "He wanted to build an empire here. He worked double shifts at the Morning Star mine. One day, the timber gave way. I didn't even get to say goodbye." She felt a tear roll down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "I lost my son the year before that," she continued. Her voice was thick with a pain that never truly heals. "The fever took him in 3 days. He was only 5. He had his father's eyes. I remember the way he used to laugh when the spring flowers came out. Now, the flowers just remind me of what I lost." The room was silent. Only the crackling of the wood broke the stillness. To lose everything and still stand tall. "I lost a family once too," he whispered. "Back in Missouri. During the war. The raiders came at night.
I came west to outrun the ghosts. But the ghosts follow you. They follow you until you find a place to stay, until you find a reason to live. Evelyn looked into his eyes. She saw her own grief reflected back.
They were two broken pieces of a puzzle, and for the first time, they were starting to fit together. The winter of 1892 felt like one of the harshest Evelyn had ever known. The snow piled up to the eaves of the house. The cattle had to be moved into the barn. Evelyn and Gideon spent their days huddled by the fire. They talked for hours. They shared stories of their childhoods. They shared their fears of the future. The business arrangement was slowly dissolving.
It was being replaced by something deeper, something that didn't need a contract, something that didn't need a deed. One afternoon, Gideon was out in the barn. He was checking the grain supplies. Evelyn was baking bread. The smell of yeast and warmth filled the house. She looked out the window. She saw a shadow in the snow. It was a man.
He was on foot. He was stumbling. It was Silas Miller. He was alone this time. He looked frozen. He looked desperate. Evelyn opened the door. The cold wind rushed in like a predator. "Mr. Miller?" she called out.
He stumbled toward the porch. He collapsed against the railing. "The road to town is blocked," he panted. His breath came in ragged white clouds. "My horse went down a mile back. I have no place to go." Evelyn hesitated. This was the man who had tried to steal her home. This was the man who had sent armed thugs to her yard.
This was the man who represented everything she hated. Part of her wanted to shut the door. Part of her wanted to let the mountains have him. But she looked at his blue lips. She looked at his shaking, frost-bitten hands. In the West, you don't leave a man to die in the snow. Not even an enemy. "Come in," she said. Her voice was like iron. Gideon came in from the barn a moment later.
His eyes narrowed when he saw Silas Miller. By his hand went instinctively to the knife at his belt. "What is he doing here?" Gideon growled. "He would have died out there, Gideon," Evelyn said. Gideon looked at the man. He looked at his wife. He saw the compassion in her eyes. He took a deep breath. He nodded. "Fine," Gideon said.
But he stays by the door. They fed Silas Miller. They gave him a warm blanket. They gave him hot coffee. As the night wore on, Silas looked around the room. He saw the way Gideon looked at Evelyn. He saw the quiet, hard-won peace of the home they had built. "I was wrong about you," Silas said. His voice was raspy. "I thought you were just a drifter. I thought you were looking for a meal and an easy mark. But you've got something here that money can't buy. The company, they don't care about people. They just care about the silver. They don't see the soul of the land. I'm resigning my post when I get back to town." Evelyn looked at him in surprise. "Why tell us this?" "Because I haven't seen a real home in a long time," Silas said. "And I don't want to be the one to destroy it." When the storm finally cleared, Silas left. He kept his word. The land company backed off. The husband strategy had worked. The ranch was safe. But as spring arrived, a new problem arose. A problem of the heart. The arrangement was supposed to end when the threat was gone. The fences were fixed. The deed was secure. The grass was turning green in the valley. The wild roses were starting to bud. Gideon stood on the porch. His bags were packed. His horse was saddled. Evelyn stood in the doorway. Her heart was in her throat. It felt like it was going to burst. "The spring is here," Gideon said. He wouldn't look her in the eye. "You're safe now, Evelyn. The land company won't bother you again. I suppose I should be moving on."
Evelyn felt a sharp, stabbing pain in her chest. She looked at the man who had stood by her in church. She looked at the man who had faced down gunmen for her. She looked at the man who had held her hand in the darkness. She looked at the man she had grown to love. "Is that what you want, Gideon?" she asked.
To move on? Gideon looked at his horse. He looked at the long, open road. Then he looked at Evelyn. His eyes were full of a raw, naked longing. "I've been moving on my whole life," he said. "I've never stayed in one place long enough to see the seasons change. But for the first time, I don't want to leave. I'm tired of being a ghost, Evelyn."
Evelyn took a step forward. She reached out and touched his arm. "Then don't," she whispered. "The contract was for a husband, Gideon. But I find I want the real thing. I want the man who stayed when the world was cold." Gideon dropped his bags. They hit the porch with a heavy thud. He didn't say a word. He just took her in his arms.
He pulled her close. He kissed her. It was a kiss that tasted of spring. It was a kiss that tasted of new beginnings. It was a kiss that promised a future where they weren't just surviving, they were living. What happened next shocked the town of Silver City. Evelyn and Gideon Vance had a real wedding. This time, there were flowers. Wildflowers from the hills.
There was music. A fiddle player from the saloon came and played for free. And even Reverend Graves had a smile on his face. He saw the way they looked at each other. He saw that some alliances are made in heaven, even if they start on a dusty porch. They turned that small ranch into one of the most successful in the county. They had children of their own, 2 boys and a girl. They named the girl Mary, after the widow who had shown them kindness. And they always made sure there was a hot meal for any traveler, because they knew that sometimes a simple question can change a life. "Have you eaten?" Or, in Evelyn's case, "Will you be my husband?" As we close this chapter of the frontier, remember this. Love is the greatest courage of all. It is the only thing that can turn a wilderness into a home. The Owyhee wind still blows, but now it carries the sound of laughter. It carries the scent of a life well lived. This story reminds us that even in the harshest conditions, beauty can bloom. If you believe in the power of a second chance, if you believe in the strength of a woman's heart, then you know the truth of Evelyn and Gideon. Until the next trail, keep your fire burning. Keep your heart open to the strangers at your gate. You never know when a drifter might be the answer to your prayers. May your journey always lead you home. May you find the strength to stand by those you love. Good night. God bless the pioneers. And God bless the hearts that refuse to break.